This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being with me today. So today I have my good friend, Stacy Ramsey with me. If you listened to her episode with me several weeks ago, then you'll know her. If you're new to this, then let me introduce her real quick. So Stacy and I have been friends for years. Stacy is also a licensed professional counselor, and she's actually one of the therapists that works at the practice with me. And she's amazing at what she does. She works with teenagers and adults and couples and individuals and families and the whole range. She's just an awesome person. And so I always love when basically what'll happen is we'll be at work and I'll tell Stacy, hey, I need to record an episode. And then if I don't know what I want to do or I'm behind, I'm like, will you record with me? So that's what happened. I needed help. I needed guidance. And my good friend Stacy jumped in to the rescue. So Stacy, hi.
Hi, it's such a joy to be here today.
I would like to say it's so nice to see you, but you're like 2 offices down and I saw you 20 seconds ago. But so if you are not watching this on video, you got to find it. You just got to kind of watch us do this on video. It's just more fun. But if you're just listening to the audio, then that's fun too. But okay, so last week I introduced my first series of the podcast, and this is exciting. This is actually episode 30, so we're going strong. But the series that we're doing is all about communication in relationships. And that can be relationships with a significant other, a spouse, a partner, or it could be in a relationship with a family member or friends. But it really applies very strong, even though it applies to everything like within relationships with a couple. That's kind of where a lot of the focus of Stacy and I's chat today is going to be. So I have some kind of questions I'm going to ask Stacy, and then I'll kind of jump in with her. And so the focus of today is, there's a lot of different aspects of communication to talk about. We're going to cover them over the weeks, but I figured today a good start as our first official topic is really about the time and the place of how to have hard conversations with your spouse or significant other. I would say for the sake of this, I'm just going to say spouse, and that's going to refer to your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner, whatever. So roll with me. I'm just going to say spouse. But how do you bring something up? What's the right time? What's a wrong time? What kind of headspace do you need to be in? What kind of mood do you need to be in? And that is just kind of a good intro to kind of lay the groundwork for communication. And then in other episodes, we'll be talking about kind of more specific issues and topics that couples need to really address in communication. So Stacy, why don't you set the tone for us? What does it mean to have the right time? When we talk about when's the right time in a relationship to talk about something difficult, what does that mean?
I think when we're talking about the right time, I think that it's quite literally, it's do we have enough time to explore what we need to explore in this? The other piece is going to be what else is going on contextually. Where are we environmentally? Are we trying to get something else done? Are we squeezing this in between something because it's something that's bubbling up in us and we just have to get it out kind of thing? Or are we really ready to have a conversation to explore and look at how do we meet a goal that clearly wasn't met? How did we correct something that didn't go the way it was intended to go? There's always going to be some provision for there's a goal to be reached. Do we have the time? Do we have the space? Do we have the mindset? Have we had enough self-reflection to accomplish that goal? So when we talk about time, I think it's going to encompass a number of things, not just on the clock, but do we have all the elements to make us successful at our fingertips to access them?
Perfect. Yeah. So, but talk a little bit about that clock, right? The clock matters too. So like you said, if we don't have enough time to be starting a big conversation, then it's not the right time to start that conversation. And I think that a lot of couples deal with picking bad time. Like that just wasn't, you'll hear people say like, that wasn't the time to bring that up. Like this isn't the right place. This isn't the right time. And so when you think of that clock, starting conversations late at night or on your way out the door. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think one of the, the filters that we have to put in the way we're thinking about things is simplified in this way. When we want to have a conversation, if there's been upset, if there has been failure to execute something, if there was misunderstanding and there was hurt, whatever the context of this desire is to have this conversation, there is a goal that is the desired outcome. So when we talk about that clock, we have to talk about other factors. Where's your partner? Where's your emotional headspace?
Mhm.
What has the week been like? What has the day been like? What has the last hour been like? Is something about to happen? Are we trying to get a task accomplished, whether it's with kids or dinner, or, everybody has different work schedules even, right? So I think we have to be conscientious of that. Has either one of us slept poorly? Probably. The goal is you want the best possible productive outcome. If any of those factors are going to be influenced by the clock, quite literally, whether it's a time restriction or have we got all the best resources aligned to tap into to have a really productive conversation, then we need to question, is it going to get the outcome that I'm looking for? Because that can create more harm than good.
Right. Absolutely. Because I think sometimes, and you kind of hinted at this earlier, when there's something heavy on our minds or on our hearts, we just want to get it out. Like it's bothering me. I just need to talk about it. But that's not always the right time. If you, let's say your spouse is exhausted and they've had a long day and it's bedtime and you're like, I want to talk about this, I'm upset, and they're on the brink of going to sleep, then you might get the instant relief of getting it off your chest and saying all the things that you want to say, but it's not going to achieve the thing that you want to achieve. Your goal, like you said, Stacy, your goal is not going to be met. The goal is to resolve the problem, get to a point of clarity and understanding, have good communication. But what happens, I think, in a lot of situations when you're dealing with emotions, the goal becomes unintentionally, I think it becomes to get this off my chest. I forget that my goal is to correct and repair this situation with my spouse. Instead, it becomes, I'm upset, I'm hurt, I'm sad, whatever, I'm angry, and I need you to know how I feel right here, right now. So you lose track of the goal. The goal becomes more personal, potentially more selfish, instead of a goal that's more focused on the relationship and the dynamic between you and your spouse.
Right. The goal then becomes, I need you to hear me. Nothing
Right.
more, nothing less.
Right.
And I think it's a good opportunity. It's okay if that's what it feels like. But when we talked a little bit earlier, we talked about that introspection of the situation. I think when we have kind of like the scenario you set up, spouse is going to sleep, it's not a good time to talk, I'm anxious to get this off my chest, I think that's when it's a really great time to journal or even begin the internal dialogue around, why am I feeling this way? What's this really about? Is it how the situation was handled? Is it what was done in the situation? Is there something I felt neglected in that, especially when we have this driving force of, I need to be heard, I need to be heard, I need to be heard. What about that made me feel like I wasn't being heard? Is there something about me internally that I know about myself that makes me overly sensitive to this kind of interaction? Is this something that I have to self-regulate about myself and my manifestation of what the emotions are doing in my body before I can communicate what I'm really thinking about this?
Right. Right. And I think this goes into a bigger topic that we're gonna that will be talked about more in a different episode, but it's about kind of the baggage that we bring into our relationship. So I'll just kind of touch on it real quick, but we won't go into it. It's you have to think for yourself. If you have, kind of like you're saying, Stacy, if you have a tendency to get really anxious when there's discomfort or conflict, and that because of your past experience makes you feel like this, oh my gosh, he's going to get mad at me. Maybe he won't want to be with me anymore. He probably doesn't even want to talk to me about this because he's so mad. Or what if he gets up and leaves? And like you start catastrophizing what might happen if you don't get it off your chest right now, if you don't fix it right now. And so that might have absolutely nothing to do with your relationship. That may have never played out in this relationship, but because maybe you've had a difficult upbringing where your parents did that, or maybe you were in a relationship previously where that was the dynamic, then you might be bringing that in and kind of applying it where it doesn't need to be applied. So I really like what you were saying about how that's a good time to be more introspective and maybe journal. And so that goes into the coping skill part, right? So when we feel like our need in that moment is not being met because I need to say this thing and get it off my chest, the decision is, am I handling this in a way that is best for my relationship, or am I handling it in a way that's best for me? And if you kind of give this some real thought and decide, hey, my approach typically is not good. Like, I know myself, I know I have a hard time letting things go. I'm always wanting to talk about things in the wrong time and I make it worse. Then you have to make a decision when you're not in that. Like right now, in the calm peace of mind that you have to say, hey, this is something about me that I need to change. I need to find a different way to handle my emotions. So, Stacy, let's talk a little bit about what, you talked about journaling. So what would someone potentially need to kind of pour into a journal, or maybe talking to someone else in that moment? Kind of walk us through that a little bit.
There's a couple of different things. Remember, we're talking about broad strokes here, not your individual DNA. So I just want to clarify that for the people that are listening to us. But overall, kind of being able to share your overall impression and how you felt. Think about practicing. There's two ways you could do this. If you are that one that needs to get it out, I have a very clinical term that I use with work with some of my clients called a brain dump. So we take everything in there and we just dump it out. It is whether you want it to be stream of consciousness, unfiltered. It doesn't have to make sense. I don't need backstory. This is not being written for someone else to read and have a clarity in it. It's for you to get all of this emotionally driven language out and then look at it and then maybe have some space with it and see, do I really feel that way? Because sometimes we say stuff because the emotion's driving us, but I don't really feel that way. I mean, I feel that, but it's not logical. It's not really what I really know is truth, but it really feels like the truth, even though I understand it's not. That's a good place to be. Or sometimes it's to write it very specifically as a narrative, as your perception saw it unfolding, because then we can go back and very specifically review, where did this emotion spike? What was that really about? Was it about this being said, this being done, and it spiked something internally in my emotional? What is that driven? And then I could ask a question like, when was the last time I felt that way? Or maybe when's the very first time I ever felt that? Especially if you can see that you're overreacting in it. If it's not relevant to the events that happen, but you are really strongly feeling it, which kind of plays into when I need to get this off my chest so bad, it doesn't matter what's going on, I need to spew it. Mm-hmm. Usually there's some kind of overreaction because we have felt this somewhere else in our life that we didn't feel like we were in control of, wasn't heard, can't vindicate. And now somewhere in the space that we're in now, we are not going to be that victim, that individual anymore. We overreact in it. So there's a couple of different ways, and that's kind of where we hinted at where's your past been, and we can address it in two different ways based on what fits. But what it allows us to do is download and then review, and then see from almost a third person where we're not as invested in it. Keep in one caveat that we are not encouraged in our society, that it is not our significant other's role to manage our emotions. Do we have situations that we rely on them to kind of calm us down, help us redirect? Absolutely. But remember, that's a gift in the moment. It's not their job description, it's ours. So that's why the introspective and the journaling before we go into that is super helpful, because we're doing our part in this before we ask them to look at it and do their part.
Right. Absolutely. I love how you said that, because we are responsible for regulating our own emotions. And yes, our spouse is there as a team. We're there to help each other back and forth with that. But if you're not doing your part, then it's hard to expect your teammate to do their part. They're not responsible for your part, you know? And so, you know, so I think journaling is really helpful. And some people cringe at that term. I don't mean it in the like Dear Diary, you know, it's the bullet point, like you said, the brain dump, just the whatever it is that you just are like the word vomit that you want to spew to that other person, or the thoughts that you can't shut off. What would that look like if you just wrote it out? And it could be ugly and make no sense. Like you said, it's just bullet points, or it could be a full narrative. It just depends on who you are and how you do things. But then some people are really awful at writing, and they don't enjoy that, and it stresses them out more. Some people need to speak it. You know, who is your go-to person? Do you have a friend or a close, you know, family member that you feel you can say whatever and they're not going to judge you? Go to them, call them, text them, whatever you need to do. Or open, for some people it's, you know, they have all kinds of voice recording apps for free. Just word dump it, you know, say it and record it. And if you want to hear it again later, you can. If you want to delete it, you can. But also, kind of going from what you're saying, Stacy, waiting when we do it initially, if you immediately dive into everything I'm feeling, I'm going to dump on you, then it's going to come out very raw and potentially will lead to more problems, because you're not filtered. You're saying things without considering how the other person's feeling, because you're very focused on yourself. And so I find, as someone who's highly emotional and sensitive, I 100% of the time when I wait, whether it's 30 minutes, an hour, a few hours, or the next day, I always 100% of the time feel calmer when I have this conversation, and I'm more in control. And being in control is good. It's important because A, you don't feel like you're a disaster and a hot mess spewing things that don't make sense emotionally. And B, you protect the relationship, and you're talking to your spouse with the desire to improve the relationship for the sake of the relationship, not for yourself. And then, you know, I guess if there was a C there, it's progress, improvement, and hopefully change in the right direction. So for you, Stacy, I mean, do you find, is that true for you personally, and just in the experience you've had with clients? Does waiting make a difference?
I definitely think waiting makes a difference. The time span will vary from person to person. If you've got someone who tends to avoid conflict, sometimes the longer you wait, it never happens. Yep. Those people, though, that I know, when they come up, I tend to encourage them to write a letter after they do the other personal work, because at least it's written and they can maybe share it with that significant other if they feel like that initial interaction is too much and too overwhelming. I think that managing our own emotions helps us when we better understand where we're coming from. We can take all the noise of all the stuff, how something was said, body language, projection from the past, all of that. It is sifted out. And at the end of the day, when you do the introspection, you go, what did you want to happen that was different? What did you feel like caused fill in the blank emotion? Why do you think it triggered that? Is that something that was as a result of something that other individual did, said, or their behavior? Or is that something that touched an old wound that we go, oh, we've got some work to do there? Maybe it has nothing to do with that other person. Maybe they were a catalyst for kind of going, oh, I've been kind of traveling along and this hasn't been touched in a while. And so I thought I was good to go. Well, we just maybe hadn't gotten into that aspect of, especially a close relationship. You know, I can work with individuals that deal with codependency or attachment or that kind of thing. If they're not in new close relationships, they can manage in these familiar everyday relationships. They're like, I've got this beat, I've done great work. Enter new relationship, enter new dynamics. All of a sudden we're poking all those things we thought we had managed. Well, we had figured out a framework of what works best for me in my familiar closest of relationships. It took work to get there. I've got a new relationship. It doesn't mean I've checked the box and I don't have that anymore. It just means I need to find a new appropriate framework in this new relationship, that every time I go into a new relationship, I need to be aware that I may be a little bit more sensitive than other people while I'm figuring that out.
Right. Right. So with waiting, I think comes mindset, right? What are we waiting for? Are we just waiting for time to pass, or are we waiting for a change in mindset? We're waiting for a change in mindset, right? So for every person, it's different. Like you said, it's unique to your personality and your circumstances and where you are and who's around. And so, you know, you're waiting for privacy. You're waiting for the children not to be walking in. You're waiting for someone not to come barging in and interrupt your conversation. You're waiting for a place to speak where you feel like you can be vulnerable. You know, you certain conversations you probably shouldn't have at a restaurant in public. You need to have them in the privacy of your bedroom with the door closed when the kids are asleep or whatever. But then we're also waiting for, when we say mindset, it's, are you calm? Are you controlled? So elaborate on mindset, Stacy. What do you think? What does that mean?
I think as I was listening to you, what kind of came to mind is, am I ready to hear?
Mm-hmm.
We ask questions. We have to be prepared to hear and listen to someone else's answer. If I am sensitive in this area for whatever the reason is, then there's a greater chance that there's a blind spot in our significant others that had, unless you have a really combative relationship, the likelihood is there's not a lot of malice intent to expect, except when we come in and we're not in control and we don't have that mindset, we may be feeling we were under attack, and it was just, we were missing the point on both ends. It was not maliciously stated from one side or the other, but how we took it was attached to something else. That goes both ways. It's not just for me to have it cater to what I need. It's about, I need to listen where they came from. I need to listen to, did I inadvertently trigger some kind of defense in my partner? And maybe that built on this layer upon layer of an exchange that clearly wasn't pleasant, and that's why we're trying to figure this out.
Right.
And we also have to go into, we want to have conflict resolution, but I think it's a great opportunity to go, how do we guard against this not erupting again? What strategies can we implement that along the way we are safeguarding that we don't get to this part that's as destructive as this one was?
Right. Right. And, I think the being ready to listen was such a great point, because I think when we are reeling off of our emotions and something happened and we're upset and we're like, I got to get this off my chest, I think it comes with an unintentional entitlement that, like, my feelings are all that matters right now. I'm so angry. I just need to tell them how I feel. And then you go in forgetting, first of all, you're going to say it probably a lot uglier and more aggressive than it needs to be, and your words aren't going to be clear. But also, we forget in that moment that there's going to be a response. Like, I don't get to just go in and say all the things I'm mad about, all the things I'm sad about or hurt about, and that other person just has to take it because my feelings are more important. No, you're not more important than the other person. Even if you're right, you still have to give the other person an opportunity to speak. And it could be an easy resolution, or it could lead to an argument or a fight. And sometimes you're wrong. And I personally have experienced this where, when that emotion is so strong, surely there's no other way to look at this. Of course I'm right. Of course, what the thing I'm feeling is like, the other person is just so insensitive. But then when we get down to it and I say all the things that I want to say and that other person says what they want to say, then it's like, sometimes there's that like humbling feeling of like, well, crap, they're right. Like, yeah, I was right about this part, but I was wrong about this part. And it's such an uncomfortable feeling. No one wants to be wrong. But if the goal is, I'm going in this because I have an agenda and I need to get my feelings hurt, then if the other person is right about any of it or all of it, then I'm going to be very defensive about it. But if I go in with the agenda of, something is bothering me, but I want to address this in a way that nurtures our relationship and improves it, then when the other person is right and I'm wrong about a little or a lot of it, then I won't take it. Like, yeah, it'll feel kind of yucky to be wrong, but it won't be this personal defeat. It's more of like, you're right, I'm sorry. And I think that's important to remember. Go ahead.
It's sometimes there's this caveat that where I'm sitting, I am right. And where you're sitting, you are right. It's wrong for me and it's wrong for you, but it's right for me. What my couples will hear me say, and oftentimes I have, the first time I say it, I have to get the most, the strangest expressions. But what I tend to say over and over when I'm working with couples with this is, do you want to be right or do you want to be in relationship? And what I mean by that is not, if you want to be in a relationship, you just lean to whatever they're saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is being right, stating you're right, proving your case, because where they're sitting, it may not be right for them, but where you're sitting, it's so very right. And you need them to adopt your rightness to be at one with self, right? Is it so important that it's worth sabotaging the relationship? Because let's go back to child development. Our kids, when they disagree with us, it's not them trying to be defiant all the time. They're building autonomy. Well, what if I do it this way? I mean, at some point we have to embrace, it's okay for us to redirect and say, we're not going to do it that way. That is a viable choice, but it doesn't work within these parameters. They are not trying to get under our skin. They are practicing their autonomy. Well, we do not grow that as individuals. So in relationship, when we live in close proximity and we share life and we share all kinds of belief system and views, and we have different experiences, sometimes we have to realize that our autonomy is going to put us at opposite ends of the spectrum. Do we need to be right, or do I want to be in relationship? And how you handle that is, how do we how do I agree to disagree really looks like.
Right. No, I love it. And the way I look at a relationship or really anything in life is that we never stop growing. It's just impossible. There's nothing that you become so great at that you can never get better at it. And in a relationship, in a marriage, that is the case, because you're dealing with another person who, I mean, you yourself are growing and changing as you age, as you have experiences, and so is that other person. And so to make sure you're growing on the same page, you have to have conversations. And some of those are easy, some of those are a little more difficult. But if you're not course correcting when you get off course, if you're not talking about these things that are happening in your life, whether something you jointly experienced or something you experienced when you were apart from each other in your day, if you don't talk about those things, then you can grow apart and you can get off track. But I think it comes with a need to continue to see value in communication, in talking. And so then I'll know more about you. So if I've paid attention and we've made an effort to grow together, then I'll know what the right and the wrong way to talk to you is. And I'm not always going to get it right. But if I know that you really don't need to have these kinds of conversations right before bedtime, or when you're hungry, or when you've had a hard day at work, then I do have to be a self-aware participant in that. And so I want to be able to remind people that, pay attention. Like, if your spouse can't hear that now, don't bring it up. Just because you need to do it, don't do it. But it works both ways, because if you're doing that to your spouse and they're giving you that service right back, then everyone's need is met. If they are saying, hey, my significant other, my spouse is really not able to talk when he or she just had a crap day at work or whatever, then you're going to get your needs met too. No one's going to get put in a corner at the wrong time. And so it kind of goes in. Stacy, talk to us a little bit, and we're running out of time here, but let's wrap up this one, and then I have one more question for you. But talk about speaking a little bit in the way that the other person hears better.
I think that concept of knowing your audience, know what your significant other can connect with. If there is something that you are already successful with and it's already been established, let's use that as a frame of reference. If you know there's something important to them and you know they may be a little bit defensive going into this, let's own that. I recognize this is important to you and I don't want to take away from that. Can we build out from that? Because I need a little bit more maybe in this area. So how do we negotiate, compromise? And I think this is important and I think this aspect is important, but I don't really know how to merge the two. What are your thoughts on that? That is a very clear way that you're telling your partner, I'm not dismissing what you need so I get what I need. I wanted this to be an adjunct to what works best for both of us.
Mm-hmm. And it also, earlier you said, sometimes writing it down. So if you know your significant other, your spouse is better at reading what you have to say instead of just hearing it, then you have to keep that in mind. If you know that your significant other's checks out after 5 minutes, don't drone on and on. If they need to, if you need to talk to them when they've right after a meal or something, okay, keep that in mind. So really using what you know about that person and what will be the best way for them to hear you, not what's best for you to communicate. So, okay, I have one more question for you, or kind of get your thoughts. So earlier when you and I were talking before we recorded, you said something that I love, and you and I both use this in our practice, but you were talking to me about the connection between emotions and words. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Do.
All right, go for it. Explain it to us.
I think we always have to remember that emotions do speak louder than words. We get lost in the emotions. So if our message is so important, which when we feel that drive to share and reconcile and really come up to conflict resolution, the emotion that's driving us is motivating us. But if it becomes louder than the words and the message and the goal that we want to change the outcome of, then it gets lost. If I'm crying, if I'm screaming, if I am whatever the emotion is, and my partner all of a sudden is defensive because this is what they're walking into, they don't know fully what's going on. If they are having a rough day, they can't regulate themselves and us as well. What has happened is I'm going to stop this floodgate of emotion, whatever it takes. And I may appease you, but it may not change the outcome. It may not really get the goal that we want to attain at the end of this conversation. The emotions are going to derail whatever it is that we're trying to speak to one another, the message, the framework of how to work better together. So that's where that waiting and some of these other techniques that we've talked about really tie in, introspection, all of that, because when we can pull that into a better scope and sequence, if you will, of what we want to attain in the conversation, then we're not distracting the work that we're doing with that emotional outburst. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay for it to be right up to the surface. It just can't lead the message and it can't distract the message.
Right. So basically, if you're yelling at me, I'm not going to hear anything you're saying. I'm just going to be very, very hyper aware of the fact that you're yelling at me, and I'm going to shut down. So you could be saying the most profound, true, and amazing words possible, but if you deliver it to me with yelling or cussing or something like that, I'm not going to hear anything you say. And I think that goes for the heavy crying. Like if you're tearing up, that's fine. But if you're sobbing and throwing a fit, no one's going to hear you. No one's going to hear what you say. And so I think we have to be aware as the speaker to make sure our delivery matches our words. And then we also, as listeners, have to be mindful that if I'm the listener and I know my spouse is super emotional or angry and they're yelling, they're loud, whatever, then I'm going to have to say, listen, I can't hear this right now. I'm not able to take in what you're saying because you're yelling at me. So you can continue to yell and we're not going to get anywhere. Or can we please take a minute? Let's take a break and come back to this when we're calmer. And that's something where we're both responsible in a relationship. The speaker and the listener is both responsible when talking about something difficult. When you're the speaker, sometimes you come in with more control because you know what you want to talk about and the listener just kind of has to get ready for it. But to be truly respectful, sometimes the speaker has to say, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Are you ready? Like, are you in a good space to hear it? And if not, like, do you need to take a shower first? Do you need to have a meal? Or when we start talking, as long as you don't abuse this and use it as a way to get out, if you think you're ready, but really you're not, you have to have that. You have to say, hey, listen, I don't think I'm ready for this. Can we take a minute? Let me just gather my thoughts and I'll come back with a response. But this is all easier if we're building, if it's kind of comes after an established healthy relationship. You can't just jump into healthy communication if you haven't done that before. Like you have to really work on it and build it. You can't have one good day of communication and then 7 awful days. Like this has got to be your new mission, that you are going to make an effort and a point of being better at the way that you talk to each other, being respectful, being kind, being uplifting of the other person. But it all starts with, how do I see my spouse? Do I see them as a partner, or do I see them as someone that I have to kind of compete with for communication for this relationship? So Stacy, you and I both have clients waiting for us, so we got to go. Thank you so much. I feel like we could talk about this for so much longer, but I feel like we gave it a good kind of, just a little, I don't know, got our points across. Yes. Thank you. I really appreciate it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.